There was another outrage taking place in Willowbrook, and that was human experimentation. The Willowbrook was terrifically overcrowded, and one of the ways you got your kid into Willowbrook was to let him or her be injected with hepatitis. So that was a whole other issue that we're not really dealing with, but I just want you to know. My son was born in 1968, and in 1968, there really wasn't very many community programs. In fact, you couldn't even get your kid in public school. The reason we got our kids in public school is there was a lawsuit brought by the Brain Injury Group. That
Sonia Brad.
Yeah, well, it was a citywide group that eventually got kids with disabilities in schools. But to show you what kind of parents, what we were up against, my son was born in 1968. He was my fourth child. And frankly, I was a small businessman, and I knew nothing about nothing. So when we found out he had Down syndrome, I naturally spoke to the doctor. And the doctor said, well, the best thing to do is put him away and, get your wife pregnant again and come back here next year. Mm-hmm. So I had 3 other children, and they had never said that about my other 3 children. So I said, this sounded strange. So naturally, we took him home. And I started looking. I said, what do you do with a kid who has Down syndrome? And I remember I called Willowbrook, as a matter of fact. And they said, well, we have no programs unless you want to, make an application to put him in Willowbrook. So as time went by, a group of us banded together, kids with Down syndrome, and we started our own school and so forth. And that's how I met Bill. Bill came down and addressed us and told us about the conditions in Willowbrook, which I had lived in Staten Island all my life, and frankly, it was just a bunch of big buildings to me. I didn't know what the hell we were doing. So what happened was, the issue was, where is the money going? And in Staten Island and in other places where there are institutions, the money goes to the institution. And on Staten Island, the one community program that was on Staten Island was really run by the doctors from Willowbrook. Our goal was to try to get programs for our kids in the community, and all this money was being tied up in Willowbrook and the institutions that there really wasn't money in the community. So there were 2 groups of people. There was the community people, and there were the parents of the kids in Willowbrook. The parents of the kids in Willowbrook were under an awful lot of pressure because, if I'm not mistaken, I think you were really supposed to pay for your kids to be in Willowbrook. So that kind of was out here, So if you protested too loudly, you might get a bill. You know what I mean? So there was that whole thing that it was hard for them, as Diana said, to really get out and protest it. Whereas those of us who are in the community, we became radical people because we saw that kids shouldn't be treated this way. And by the way, let me tell you that my son Robert, Bill mentioned one of the kids on the film, had Hirschsprung's disease. Well, my son had that. And basically that's a disease of the colon, so you don't have a normal bowel movement. And if it's not taken care of, you have some real problems. So we took our son was diagnosed, we took him to Columbia, they cut out part of your colon, they reattach it, and, you live like a normal human being. The reason I mention that is that when you look at pictures of the kids in Willowbrook, and these pictures were used by the people that were opposing us all the time, saying, what can you do with a kid like this? There's nothing you can do with a kid like this. Well, that kid in there that had Hirschsprung's didn't have to look like that. And any Downs kid that was in Willowbrook shouldn't have been in Willowbrook, for the most part, as far as I know. Nobody belongs in Willowbrook. The thing about Willowbrook is it was all reversed. The good patient was the one who stood in the chair and looked at the ceiling all day. If you were a bright, inquisitive, curious kid, you were a bad patient, and they tried to stop that. So it was a whole strategy of using the community to help the people of Willowbrook, the Willowbrook parents, and we were under tremendous pressure. And of course, Bill was the driving force, and this is how this all came about. And when he says that there was a lot of pressure, believe me, there was a lot of pressure, because all the politicians, everybody, was saying that Bill was a radical and so forth, and don't listen to him, and you can't do anything with these kids, and so on and so forth. But that's how it came about. And now, there are more programs in the community, but there still aren't enough. there's a whole question of what do you do with your kid when he gets older, then you're gone. People in the community still oppose group homes. The politicians still don't want to pay for group homes. They still rather put kids in institutions or nursing homes or wherever.
Group